morning.
Welcome.
Right. Welcome to our Horse Wisdom Yoga Alumni Diaries. And we are super excited to be joined by Ann Koniuch. Am I pronouncing it?
Koniuch, yep.
From Alma, Ontario, where she runs a wonderful practice called At Home with Jo and her herd. So I want to welcome Jo. She'll tell you more about what she offers and whatnot as we move through our interview together. But we got lots of really interesting things to talk about and share before we get to that point. So Jo, welcome. It's been a little while since I've seen you, although I'm so grateful that I get to see you here and there on social media and on our alumni calls and everything else that we do together. But I'm really excited today in particular to kind of, it's been a year pretty much since your training, and I'm just really excited to kind of reflect on like what that's been like, and just like the whole process of you enrolling and going through the journey with your horses. And I'd love for like listeners and viewers to be able to hear more about where you are now with all of this. So you've had a really long and incredible learning journey through the yoga and all of the other modalities that you've studied. So maybe you can share a little bit about that as well. I'm going to hand it over to you. Maybe we'll start with like, what brought you to Horse Wisdom Yoga to begin with?
Okay, so horses have been a part of my life forever. I didn't have the words to articulate what going to the barn meant in terms of healing, but I knew it was there. It was always where I went. And no matter if things were good or bad, my place of integration was always the barn. I was very, very fortunate. My parents recognized very early on that if they didn't get me a horse, I probably wasn't going to be very good. So I had my first horse when I was 7. And I've had horses my entire life, and I mean, there's never just one, right? There's always going to be another horse or a donkey or something that comes into the barn. And so, as I went through all of these other modalities that you talked about, I started out with, pole fitness and dance. And that was about, I was 40, and it was just bringing empowerment to women, like really feeling comfortable in your skin and owning, your feminine self, right? And it was great workout as well. And then I went into personal training and nutrition, and it was all about bringing awareness to the self. And I really did specialize specifically with women. That was kind of my calling, was to really be a voice for women in their wellness journey and in bringing them to space within themselves where they could just embrace who they were, where they didn't feel like they had to, be something that they were supposed to be. And I think that was all part of my own healing journey as well, because I was always who I was supposed to be for a very long time. And, once I got to where I was bringing yoga into it, and there was a lot of my own healing happening, the yoga trainings that I took went from my 200-hour yoga to a 300-hour yoga psychology training. So it was very much about healing for me. And knowing that the horses were a big part of my own healing practices, I became very interested in, all of the different modalities. I mean, there's tons. As I looked at each of them, there was something that just didn't resonate with me, whether it was scripted or, you had to do specific things, or the horses were being ridden, or my herd is retired. They are living a life that they deserve. They're just being horses right now. So I didn't want to bring in anything that was going to, be forcing them to do things. And when I started following you, and it's been quite a few years now, and I remember when I first started following you, I thought, this girl is not for real. Like, she's not really doing this. This isn't, I mean, you were doing yoga poses out in your paddocks, and I just thought, but it was what I wanted. It was truly what I wanted. And I knew in my heart that you were doing what I wanted to do, and I needed to get into a mindset, because I also come in with a very different mindset on horses, right? Like going through competitive trainers and competitions, and the mentality that we had to control the horses. that we had to, and if we didn't control them, they were going to control us and we were going to get hurt. So watching you do what you did, that whole part of my brain was saying, wait till she gets kicked in the nose. I mean, there was a lot that was going on for me, but the more I followed and the more I listened and really came to understand what you were doing, it was like, you know what, I'm curious enough that I need to go. And I did a retreat, just a one-day retreat with you, just to kind of experience it. And I remember saying to you that day at the retreat, because it was phenomenal, I remember saying to you, the difference between you and me is you've put the puzzle together and I have all the pieces in a box. And when I left, my daughter-in-law and I drove home, and I said to her, I said, the next training I'm in. Like, she does trainings, I'm in. This is what I want to do. And she said, oh, Mom, you and your horses would be so great at this. And so, I mean, it took almost a year because COVID happened. Yes. But we did get that training in. And, I had a lot of time leading up to my training where I was following along with, offerings that you had done in terms of connecting with your herd and how to, bring them out into, not just any horse is going to communicate with you. A lot of them are very shut down. And in coming back to my herd and offering them freedom and offering them choice, I was able to witness just how shut down they were, right? They're wonderful animals. They come in and they go and they eat and they're happy and they do all of the horsey things. But I didn't have that heart connection fully with them. I was benefiting from being around them, but I wasn't hearing what they needed to benefit from being around me. Beautiful. And so the training with you and your herd really opened me up to the listening aspect. So that was kind of my story of how I found you and how it came to resonate. I mean, I just knew when I left that workshop that I had found the modality. And when I say there's a lot of modalities, that's no joke. And I know there's so many. And you can find all sorts of, different modalities of healing with horses. And Absolutely. Not to shake any of them, but for what I wanted for me and what I was comfortable putting my herd into, yours was, to me, it was the most freedom of choice. Like, I don't ever go out with clients into a field and demand a performance from either any of my herd.
And that's the beauty of this work too. Exactly. The beauty is that there's no training, right? Like, so people you train your horses to do this. It actually, there's no training. It's like almost like an untraining. And in that untraining, we're also kind of untraining ourselves, right? So whether it's untraining from, traditional, competitive models or, even just from the institution, like school and academia, like just all of this untraining that sort of happens when we start to untrain and undo the horses. So that way they kind of come back to their nature of being a horse, right? Yeah. And like you said, Joe, like your horses are retired. They're happy, they're healthy. But you still felt that little piece missing, as I heard you say, right? Like where it was like, sure, everything's good, but it's like your horses guided you to knowing that there was even more joy and more bliss that could be experienced together through that connection. I wanted to just rewind a little bit to where you kind of started to talk a little bit about that undoing with spirit. Can you share a little bit more? Like, that experience was mind-blowing. Like, it was just mind-blowing. And if I can just share a little bit first on this end of being the facilitator and a witness to it, it was so interesting because he was like literally pawing at the gate to come out. Yes. So we knew that he was choosing you and that he wanted to work with you. It was just that, first of all, was like a big indicator that something was up and something big was going to happen. And then it was like, we moved through this kind of outdated mentality of like having to control the situation to like really letting go and taking that leap of faith in yourself and watching what unfolded. And maybe you could share a little more about how that all went down and what did ultimately unfold with you in spirit.
Yeah, so that that experience has been like just a huge healing catalyst for me all the way around. I still get this bubble in my throat every time I think about it. So the goal was for me to get the horse to follow me over a log. It was about challenge. He represented the challenge, the log represented the solution, and I had to bring everything full circle. And as I was walking in, you had given me a halter and a lead rope. And mentally, I'm going over in my head, there were several opportunities where I was sent out and with the trainer, sent out to a muddy paddock with a halter and a lead rope to a school horse who had absolutely no desire to be my mount for my next hour-long lesson. And I would chase and I would try to, there were nights where I hung the halter back up on the fence, left the horse, got in my truck and drove home. I had driven an hour for my lesson. And I just said to him, you know what, that's not going to happen anymore. So as I went in, that was all going through my mind, because it was kind of a running joke in the barn that Joe's horse needed to be brought in. I was fancy, right? And so going out, I'm holding this halter and I'm thinking to myself, I'm also coming in thinking I've been through, there were things going on in my life that were kind of repeat things that, I had done the same thing and I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And so mentally I'm thinking, do something different. Don't do it the way that you've traditionally done it. And so he immediately hooked up with me.
Yes, I just want to stop there for 1 second. I'm just going to rewind just a wee bit, just to clarify for the listeners. So the exercise is called In the Face of Challenge. And the pole actually represents the challenge. So the pole is on the ground.
Oh, sorry, I got that backwards.
No, that's okay. That's okay. The pole represents the challenge. And the idea is that you're stepping over that pole with the horse. And I offer the tools. So there's the horse. The horse is not the tool, but the horse is present. The tools are the halter, the rope. There's a stick. And there's never any contact with the stick and the horse. The trainees are shown how we work with the stick in session if needed. But again, so I just want to clarify that I never handed it to you. I had everything there.
Oh, it was there, right?
Yes, everything was there.
Yes.
And it was up to the participant to choose how they're going to go about this exercise. So they've got all these tools. They've already worked with how to use them and all of that. So we're not just giving participants sticks and saying, here, go get the horse over the pole. So we've already kind of gone through a check-in and how to kind of work with these tools. And then of course we've got the horse present. And I think we left off where Joe, you were expressing that he had already joined up with you. So the two of you were already there. And then from there, what happened?
As soon as he connected with me, I kind of got a little bit of a boost. It was like, okay, he's with me here. I'm not alone here. And as I was standing there, I had picked up the halter and the lead rope. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I could slip the halter on him, or I could just take the lead rope and lay it across his back or his neck and create a connection to us, right? Like the rope is joining us. It's neither one of us are tied to it. So I put this rope over his neck and I kind of make like I'm going to walk forward, and he didn't really move. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I just loop it, bring it all the way around his neck, and I'll hold, kind of the end of the rope and along the rope, and he'll have like a lasso around his neck. And, as I was doing it, I'm thinking, this feels a little bit like coercion, but I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to be embarrassed. I was worried about judgment. I mean, even though I trust you as a facilitator, I'm thinking, because in my heart of hearts, I'm believing everybody is judging me all the time, right? So I've got this rope and I have it around his neck, and then he's still not coming. So I think, well, I'll just pull the rope a little longer and then I'll wrap it around his nose, like the way you would fabricate a halter out of a lead rope, like a makeshift halter. And I thought, okay, well, rather than try to put the halter on him, in the meanwhile, he's standing there and he's like suddenly, and he turns and looks at you like, are you going to let her do this to me? And you stepped in at that moment and asked me what was going on for me, I believe was the question. And you know, have a look at what you're doing here, and you know, how do you feel about what's happening, and you know, can you connect with him? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know, I went in, I connected, I heart connected, I was feeling really good about it, and then I reverted back to old ways.
And the limiting beliefs, right? Like the limiting beliefs. So you notice how that shift, like right in that moment where you know, maybe there was a pattern of like old beliefs that you're being judged, or you've got to, you know, there's that competitive mindset with the, you know, the fact that you were showing or competing with the horses and stuff, right? So you've got all these horse people around you that are watching your every move, right? So, you know, going back to kind of like those sort of triggers, right? To outdated beliefs. And that was where the disconnect happened, was as soon as we went into that place in the mind, that disconnect happened. And all of a sudden we've got this horse kind of like wrapped up in this lead rope. and I get it that, you know, and this was the funny part, was that your horses probably are used to that, you know, you just, you know, throw the rope over, hey, come on, let's go. And it's not a big deal. Right?
Exactly. That's exactly how they do it.
Right. And some of our horses are easy like that too, but Spirit is our wild horse. And this was the interesting thing, was that you knew that. So I remember saying something along the lines, after we had the time for you to reflect on like what was going on and what you were experiencing. I remember saying something like, it feels like you were kind of making it harder for yourself, because like, you know, here's this horse who we know is not really trained other than like safety stuff. And, you know, we've got this, you know, rope kind of working this thing out, which I think I said after too, as a horsewoman, I had to give you great props and kudos, because I thought to myself, well, hey, you've managed to keep this young, you know, untrained horse super calm while you're like wrapping his face with a lead line. But, right? So I mean, as a horsewoman perspective, hey, you know what? You were teaching a young horse something new, and he was accepting of it. So that was kind of cool. But going back to the activity, it was actually bringing up something else, and that was more around those outdated patterns. And you know, it's really common for us, even with as much work and healing and studying and practicing that you've done, though, and myself included, you know, 20 years worth, but those deep-seated old beliefs, they like to pop their little heads up here and there. And the horses are magnificent at bringing them up, because they just get right to the heart of like what the deep stuff is and help us kind of excavate it. So it's there now, it's in our awareness, and we can make change. And that's what you ended up doing. So what did you end up doing from there, Joe?
Well, from there, I removed the rope, let the wild horse free. But I just remember he walked away, and you kind of went back to your corner. And I stood there for a minute thinking about, you know, the whole heart connection and, you know, all of the things that we were being taught in your training, plus what I had been working on, you know, for the 8 months leading up to this training. And logically, I knew all of these things, and I believe all of those things. I wasn't practicing those things. And so I remember walking back up to him again, and again, instantly, he just, you know, he leaned into that connection that we had. He kind of looked at me and went back to grazing, and, you know, he was waiting for me to say, you know, here's what's going to happen. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, what's left? You know, what can I do that I haven't already done? And I don't know how I even came to it, but I looked at the log, because at this point we had kind of, the log was here and we were kind of facing this way. And I walked around the front of him, and I looked at him, and I was thinking in my heart, you know what? I'm just going to give up. And you were over there, and I was going to turn to you and say, you know what? I don't know. You know, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. And then it was just this voice in my head that said, just lead, you know? And I looked at him, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what, buddy? I'm going over the log. and I really, really, really need you to follow me. And it was like that Hail Mary pass, you know, if it works, it's going to be amazing. If it doesn't, you're going to look like you quit. And I thought to myself, you know what, it's going to work. And I started to walk, and I was walking really, really slow. Like, we weren't very far from the log, but at the same time, that connection that I had with his heart, I could feel it slipping, and I just drew, like I just kept drawing, and I just kept looking forward, and one foot after the other. And there was a brief second, I think I was about halfway to the log, when I was going to stop, because it was like, and then it was, no, just go. You've got this. Just go. And by the time I was stepping over the log, his nose was on my elbow. And I honestly thought I was going to faint. Like, it just such a rush, you know? And I thought to myself, you know, and I mean, you were cheering and Heather was cheering. And I just, you know, I thought to myself, if you could just trust yourself, you know, and just give yourself a bit of grace, right? And just, you know, just lead with your heart. And so that whole piece with spirit, I mean, I had so many profound moments that week that I like, it was just so incredible. But that piece, I think, was where I really sunk into an acceptance of myself and a belief and a trust in myself. And that I wasn't worried about what someone would say, or, you know, and I think part of the whole thing, like when I first started watching you and I was judging you based on those limiting beliefs, but my heart was saying, but that's what I want. You know what I mean? Like, there was just this conflict of,
it's like,
you know,
a battle, right? The head and the heart, you know, the head and the heart is sort of in conflict. And that's where the horses help us find that alignment, right? And that's what happened that day with you in spirit.
Yes.
It was like there was this battle happening where you have that heart connection, but now it's back to the mind, and I don't want to look silly, or I don't want to fail. And then it's back to the heart. And then eventually you're just like, I'm going, leading with the heart, trusting myself. Here I go. And all of a sudden, there he is with you. And it's like effortless, seamless, beautiful, chills all over my body. Me and Heather are just like crying. Like,
it was my rock star moment.
It was just like, are you serious right now? It was so profound. And I still get this feeling, like, as you're describing it, just like chills all over, remembering that vision of you just walking and being like, you know what, like, I'm just not even gonna bother with all this stuff. Like, I'm gonna leave this stuff and I'm just going. And, you know, and then off you went. And it was just like, you had the way you were standing was different. You were more confident, you were more heart-centered. It wasn't so much thinking, and it was just being. And in that being and being authentic, you know, all of a sudden the horse just was right there beside you. And again, this is a horse who, you know, doesn't have like training, and doesn't really know, like, you know, to you know, like how some horses, it's, you know, it's easy to throw the rope over. Yeah, you throw the rope over, or you know, like, he doesn't have any of that kind of stuff. And none of our horses really do from here, but some of them bring some of that training along with them that we've kind of untrained from. But, you know, some of the stuff they still are easy with, like the rope going over, whatever, like that stuff, they're you know, still conditioned to like accept that as being safe, because they know me really well now. It's been a decade, and they know that I would never, you know, lead them to harm's way. So they're like, okay, where are we going, right? But, you know, spirit didn't know you, right? And the fact that he didn't know you and just followed you that way was like really profound, especially when he had other choices. Like, I was there in the space as well. He could have come over to me, right? And he didn't.
It was quite profound.
And they're very aware. They're very aware, like they know. And this is, you know, I guess a message to anyone who's listening, and yourself too, being an alumni member, that sometimes, you know, doubts like the energetic aspect of this work, like the horses know. And that's just like what I keep telling myself. Like, even if I ever doubt myself, you know, before a retreat or before a training, when my mind starts to go, okay, like, you know, how's this going to go? I just let it go, and I repeat those words. Like, the horses know. They know exactly how this is supposed to go down. I just have to pay attention to like what they're saying, right? So I can't be caught up in my own thoughts. I've got to be really present with the horses and with the participants so I can feel that quantum field of energy and what's being exchanged in there. And I think that's where the horses really want humanity as a whole to get to, is like to a place that we can actually feel again. My son asked a really interesting question the other day that just sparked up so much inner conversation with myself. And he said, Mom, what language do deaf people think in? What language do deaf people think in?
Wow.
And yeah, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, like, how do we think? Like, when did we start thinking? Right? Like, we start thinking when we start being taught to work so much with our frontal lobe and our left brain, and sort of that through the institutionalization of school and society. That's the primary source of information for us at a certain point on our journey. That becomes primary, is frontal lobe, left brain, think, right? But before that happens, how are we living?
Right.
We're living from the heart.
Intuitively.
We're feeling, we're knowing, working with our knowingness, our intuition, our being, like symbiotic, relationships with nature. And, there's so much happening before all that conditioning happens. So like this process of horse wisdom yoga and many other wonderful processes out there, in trainings and whatnot, they're really not teaching you anything, and I'm the first to say, I haven't taught you anything. It's really, how have I supported you, or my intention is to support you to kind of unteach. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't stand here pretending like I know something that you don't know. It's more like, how can we remember? How can I help you remember those things? How can I remind you?
I think a lot of it too is coming into listening. Listening is something that I think since I did your training, and we touched briefly on this prior to coming online here, in terms of listening to the horses and the whole unlearning of things. I mean, my herd, very, very well trained, and I mean, you do the best you do, and when you know better, you do better, and all of those things. And part of why I've been so selective about what these horses do now is that I want them to have choice. And so, I've always been, kind of this overdoer. I don't leave things alone very long. It's got to be just right. And so, for the last year, there's been a lot of unlearning for the horses, but there's been a lot of unlearning for me too. And it's all kind of mirrored itself back and forth, because, if the weather was bad, I brought the horses in, they stayed in their stalls, and I made sure they had food and water. And, there was always this control of their environment and control of what they ate and when they ate and where they went, and this, that, and I was in control of everything. They got blankets on if I felt they needed blankets. There was no, do you want a blanket today? And I mean, people think, oh yeah, you're asking your horses if they want it. Well, I'll tell you what, if you do things in a way that offers them a choice, you will clearly see that choice being made. Ginny will 9 times out of 10 choose a blanket. Jake will never choose a blanket, and Lacey would run you down before she'd put one on. Like, it's just, and in even, coming into the barn or going out of the barn, changing how I did things. And I mean, yes, it was expedient and efficient and all of the things that I needed in my little OCD self to be in control of everything. It was also very tedious, very exhausting, very wearing on me as a person to carry all of this, looking after everybody-ness, right? And so when I did the initial work leading up to the training, and then my own work with my own herd, because I just, not every horse is going to fall into this and love doing this. There's levels of shutdown. I feel that, not that any horse can't be brought back from it, because I firmly believe that they can. Whatever traumas, when they're given that space and held in safety and freedom and choice, I do believe that, 99.9% of the time, you're going to get a horse to communicate with you. But for mine, it was all done with the best of intentions and this big giant heart of love. I was loving everybody and everything to death. So for me, that listening component, I joke about it all the time. People used to call me Joe Lots of Words, because I love to communicate. I just love communicating. But listening, and listening without any preconceived notions that I'm going to have the best answer, or I'm going to give you what you need. I'm going to give you that fixing piece. I'm going to fix it for you. Just listening, that whole ability to just be and hold space. Really, as I started practicing it with the horses, to offer them that freedom and really hear what they wanted, or be listening to them while they're interacting with clients, so that I can kind of create my own assessment of what's happening and see, is the client getting the message that I think they're getting, and can we compare notes? But you really have to listen. And that requires, a completely different mindfulness state that you have to live in around the herd. And so, I've been a mindfulness practitioner for, sadly, a very long time. There's so much logic that I have up here, and thinking that because I know it and I'm sort of almost practicing it, I really felt like I was doing great. And then I got to your training.
Oh no, don't say that.
No, but here's the thing, the horses and you and that whole training created a bridge for me that took all of the work that I had done. I was deep in a healing transitional 2 years of shadow work, and I really felt like I had a handle on everything. And I can remember driving that first day to my training with you guys, and I was just a mess inside. And it was like I knew the horses from online, and I had Malachi in my head, and I was thinking, oh, I can't wait to interact with him. Like, he was kind of like, everything was happening, and I didn't feel like I was in control of anything anymore, because I was feeling all this stuff. And as I went through the week, and in retrospect, looking back on that training, I was actually filling out the questionnaire that you sent me for this interview. And it occurred to me that one of the biggest things that happened during that training was all that logic, all of that work that I had done. You and the herd and Heather just created this bridge where it all just walked over to my heart. And I was a disaster, like in a good way. Suddenly I was feeling and releasing and letting go and bringing in, and just embracing such a different version of myself, the healed version that I knew I was up here. But I brought it into that whole feeling space.
It's and when like you embodied it, right? Like you actually embodied it.
So watching my clients go through those moments with my horses where they're coming into that, and my horses are bringing them there. It's just,
so it's rewarding, right? It's everything. It reminds me every time I do a session or a training, like I just walk away and it like reminds me why I do what I do. I'm just, this is so incredible.
Sure.
Every session's different. Every training's different. Every interaction's different. There's no like talk track. There's, we have suggestions of questions you can ask and ways to interact with the client so that we're not projecting our thoughts and our feelings of the session onto them. So we want to, be super mindful of that. So that's why we have those kind of standard questions that help us to help the client express themselves without us kind of projecting our own thoughts onto it. But I find like after sessions, like sometimes we'll have the small talk between the client and I as they're kind of walking to their vehicle or something. And that's where we'll have the kind of those comparing of the notes, right? Like, did you see when that happened? Like I could, I felt like I was going to cry or whatever. Like, and that's when we kind of just exchange notes on like, wow, like this is what I saw happening and what I felt during your experience. Like, because it is profound witnessing, like, the role of witness and facilitator, but mostly witness, is something that's needed for people to kind of take up that space. Like, there is something that happens when someone's bearing witness to our awakening, or our transformation, or our aha moments. Like, when someone is there to bear witness to that, it's like it just becomes so much more real, like, for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's why we
for
have
sure.
all of the expressive arts activities and everything included in the program, because it is really important that people have the time and space to sit with that, and that it's not all, because the horses, like, like you said, Joe, and like, I've said many times, the horses have freedom in this modality. So if they decide that they've delivered their message, I don't know if you've noticed this, Joe, but they kind of just like almost like flick their hair and walk away. When they're done, like, they're done.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's when I know that the person got their message, because the horse shows me. Because I'll see them do the whole like, okay, bye, and off they go. So it's really great having the resources of such a expansive resource kit of art activities, because that way we can go into the art model afterwards. So the person still gets to, the participant still gets to stay in that reflective space and that liminal space, if you will, without being kind of cut off just because the horse says they're complete. But we don't have to force the horse into anything. So now we just carry on in a very beautiful, organic way and bring that full circle through some kind of artistic reflection. And then the person has made tangible their experience. And even if it's like popcorn poetry is one of them, even if it's like a popcorn poetry that makes no sense in logic, it's just like these words that are jumbled together. At the end of the day, when that person looks at that poem, they're going to remember that experience, and it's an embodiment. Their body's going to remember that experience because their body created that poem and their body experienced that work with the horses. So just like you said, Joe, you kind of knew so much coming into the program. You knew a lot, and the program, if I'm hearing you correctly, the program kind of helped you take all that knowledge and embody it. And it's like, okay, now it's landed. All those years of like studying and learning and practicing kind of found a place to land really clearly, like in your body. Would you say that is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. I've always, like I say, for myself, everything begins and ends in the barn. It's just always been that way. Working with women over the last 15 years, and we are all unique in how we go about things, but we all come in with that inner critic, and that voice, those limiting beliefs. And so the thing that I love about the horses is that there's no tiptoeing around, they don't pretend or try to spare your feelings. They are just, and I remember as we were going through the training, I had tons and tons of questions for you about how will I know to let this one do that, and Ginny doesn't like this, and Jake doesn't, and what, and you just kept saying to me, Joe, just trust the herd, just trust the herd. And I had questions because, I'm a doer, right? I want it to be perfect for everybody.
Yeah.
And I remember my first session in my practicum thinking to myself, phew, I hope this works, because, I met with the horses ahead of time and we had done all of the planning, and that first session was just like a powder keg blew up. They were talking and communicating, and every message this woman could have ever asked for. And it wasn't just one. In the beginning, it was just like they were just, all of them had something to say. Like, it was like, woohoo, somebody's listening. And so it hasn't really changed. They're all very happy to be, working with clients. But, I just feel like everything that I've done along the way kind of came into an embodiment, like you say, and then organically just kind of going with where I am in my life and dealing with those kind of things. I'm intuitively creating containers, and the right people are, showing up for the workshops. And because the herd and I, there's like back in the fall when I did some of the retreats that I did, there was mother-daughter retreats that I did. I've done a gratitude masquerade with
Love that.
9 to 12-year-olds. Really, coming into those mother-daughter relationships, that's a big healing part of where I'm at right now. And building resilience. I think resilience is something that, because society is what it is, if you can get to children early on enough, and I think there's a sweet spot, and I know, for the average child, whatever that means, that period of time between 9 and 13 is really, really big in how they feel about themselves within social confines, right? And so I feel like that the workshops that I've done with the girls have been just so, like, they just are so profound. And my herd, I think, because that's where kind of my healing is at. And I've always believed that you have to kind of teach where you are. For me to open up workshops and teach, the yogic mythology or, whatever, it's not going to resonate. And so what I'm doing here at home is a deep reflection of what I'm doing in my own life. I'm showing up for me, and I'm inviting, and the herd is inviting everyone to show up for themselves as well.
I love that.
It's like you said earlier, it's not about, being the guru or the teacher and teaching anybody anything. It's about, holding space for them to remember who they are.
And creating spaces, right? And I mean, you have created a beautiful space there with your husband. Tell us a little bit more, just kind of as we sort of bring this back full circle. Like, I love what you said about this being kind of your healing path, and you're kind of like, hey, you want to come along? Like, you want to learn from each other? You want to hang out with us here at home? Like, I've kind of taken that same approach to my work with the horses. It's kind of always been like, this is what we're experiencing, and this kind of where we're at, and then just opening our hearts and our home to, others kind of exploring the same thing. And of course, we have that, I feel you and I are very similar in the sense that we're lifetime students, like we're very devoted to the study. And I think that helps people too, because they're like, okay, I can go somewhere and like, participate in this healing and also receive some of the information and the, the knowledge that you've gained on the study path as well, right? So, I always put experience up here as far as value, right? But I mean, information is close too. We need both. And I think that taking that journey as that lifelong student is also something that your clients are so blessed to receive when they come and they work with you, because it's like, what's Joe up to now? What's Joe learning about now? So when they come out to a yoga or a TRX class and you start sharing, well, I'm doing this study and this is what it's kind of a shortcut for people to not have to do all those trainings. They can just come to one of Joe's classes or sessions and they get to learn whatever comes through for you, Joe, intuitively to share. And that's very much how this model works. Is like, everyone's horse wisdom yoga practice is going to look so different, because you're kind of bringing that basket of like your own learning and your own life experiences and your own practices, and you're sort of intuitively sharing, meeting people where they are and sharing tidbits of stuff that you could offer them to help them along their way or support them along their way. And that really comes with not just the knowledge piece and the study piece, but also like getting closer to that intuition piece, which I feel like, again, you're just really embracing a gift that you've obviously always had, because I believe we all always have it, but I mean, you've always had this gift with horses, and now you're able to like really intuit. I think, like, I feel like what's coming through, you're able to intuit that in ways that are really, clear and helpful and supportive for yourself, your horses, and your clients. So how can people, like, if someone wants to come out and work with you, or maybe they have a child that they want to enroll in one of your, young adult or young people retreats, you've got lots going on there. So maybe just give us a way to find you and find your services, your offerings, your events, and your herd.
So the business on Facebook is At Home with Joe. My website is joekoniuch.com, and the website is actually, I'm in the process of building a new one. So what's there is only going to be there for a little bit longer. And then my new, more relevant, more current ideas are going to be, it's funny because nothing has really changed in terms of my philosophies. It's just, I now have partners in the business, and so it's joekoniuch.com. The classes that I offer here are all kind of just slightly south of normal. There's a lot of woo. There is a lot of woo. I have the aerial yoga. So I have hammock yoga. I have TRX yoga, which brings, kind of a little bit more power into things. The aerial yoga, I really do lean on it for that whole relaxation. Like people are just so stressed.
And tense, right? A lot of
tense. Yeah. And the hammocks are just such a great way to bring people into themselves fully supported. Like the hammock just holds you. Beautiful. It's like a warm hug for an hour. And so I have the hammocks, I have the TRX, and I have just a beginner yoga class. But it's not just a beginner yoga class of, asana. I teach breath work, we chant, we use mudras, we work with the moon energy. It's kind of a keep yoga weird, beginner yoga. Again, it comes back to teach where you are.
Yeah.
And for me, the psychology of yoga, I did the 300-hour training with Ashley Turner, and really got into the power of meditation and the power of breath work, and just, how we can use it in all of the things that we're afflicted with right now, like the anxiety, the depression, addiction, recovery, and all of those things are so relevant in my life right now. It's where I'm going, not me personally, but the people around me.
Yes.
And knowing how to, support people on their journeys. A lot of it comes back to just listening.
Yeah. Yes.
And
holding
trusting,
those spaces.
Trusting yourself, allowing things to happen, letting go of attachments, all of that stuff. So my beginner yoga really does embody those teachings. And
how can people access like a calendar or something? So there's lots going on.
It's on my website. It's on my website. The half-day retreats.
We'll post that information on the video, so that way they can access the website. Now, I know you have a special Facebook page, it's like a private group, right? What's that?
So I've given the horses, my journey with the horses, I've given kind of its own space. It's, not everybody who wants to come to a hammock yoga class is really interested in the horse side of my journey. So the horse page is Yoga Horse at Home. And basically I reflect on my time with the horses. I try for every day. It doesn't always work out to be every day, but essentially the lessons that I'm getting and the wisdom that I'm sharing with the horses in the morning, I articulate. It's a kind of a journaling process for me. I do have a journal of all of these interactions. That maybe one day it'll be a book. I don't know, but it's giving voice to their experience in becoming yoga horses.
And look at that sun coming in. I've noticed it throughout the interview. I've just noticed that these certain times and very relevant times and very illuminated times, the sun just decides to come in really, really strong. Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to share your experience, to share your wisdom, to share your light, your horses, just who you are, and that being enough and so much more. So grateful to know you and to have worked with you and to continue our connections through our alumni community. And I'm just overjoyed and excited to continue to witness where this journey takes you and your horses. And of course, not the destination, but every step along the way. So please know that you are always supported by us. And And just very grateful to have you here as part of our community. So everyone, thank you for joining us. We are grateful that you're here as well. And you can find Jo in the links below the video. We're going to add, I guess if this is on Facebook, it'll be above the video. If it's on YouTube, it'll be below. Whatever, you'll find it. We'll make sure the links are somewhere.
Use your intuition.
Yes, exactly. Find it with your heart. So we're going to have the link somewhere here, and you can reach out to Jo for some of her incredible services and check out some photos of her studio. She's got some on her website. Beautiful, beautiful space. And I really recommend her private horse group, the Yoga Horse at Home. That group, I love the posts in there. It's just going a little deeper. Yeah, it's going a little deeper shares and a little more personal. So if you like what you've experienced today, getting to know Jo a little bit, definitely join that group. I'm there as well, and I'm one of the top fans. So anyway, you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, Jo. Any parting words for you, for the listeners, or for the horses? Anything at all?
No, just keep following Fotini. You know, you'll never go wrong. Her and the herd are going to lead you to your heart. And I am beyond grateful, beyond grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so
much. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Well, everybody, there you have it. Another Horse Wisdom Yoga Alumni Diary session with Jo here at home with Jo. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.